How many members do we need for a quorum?
That's what I'm
Just
wondering.
3, because there's only really four people on the committee right now.
But does the, Mr. Davis's you start the live stream?
Yep,
Okay.
and we're muted.
All right, so,
I'd like to wait for Mr. Davis. If it's okay with you.
Sure.
Would that be
That's
good?
fine. That's
I
fine.
think we'll wait for him, so we'll have to bring him up to date as he comes in. Would be a good thing to do.
And per your request, we did meet with him.
with two. And sir, we appreciate your being here. We wanted to wait till you come before we started any discussion, so thank you for your presence. And therefore, given that we'll call this meeting to order. And of course, we have two to approve the minutes. Mr. McGraw was not in attendance on the August 22nd minutes, and of course, the October 31st. Maybe what we can do is defer, if we probably maybe defer the minutes until a later time, we can probably do that. I think may be wise, and then go ahead and move into our meeting and discuss the issues at hand as we are. So again, we'll call to order. No introductions are needed as we all know each other. I will move on to, and no one's participating remotely, is understanding, so I want to confirm that. And of course, item 2, we will defer our minutes until another meeting until, if we need to, given that, unless I can approve them solo, but you let me advise me if that's wise, or we should. If not, we'll move on. We can always come back to it. We can move to item 3, which is Mr. Dornick on page 8 to discuss the 2024 Q2 financial statements. And Mr. Dornick, will yield to you, sir, at this point.
All right, thank you.
So desire.
So let's slide down to page 12 of your package.
Okay. 12. All right.
So we're seeing the balance sheet
Okay.
and the columns, just to give you a very quick orientation. The first column of numbers to the left is December 31st, 2023. This is a hard close, but it's not audited.
Okay.
So when I say hard close, I mean that I closed it in such a way that it mirrors an audit.
Okay.
So, and then the June 30, 2023 column are the actual audited figures.
Okay.
So when you see the net change between those two columns, you know, it's a pretty reliable number.
Okay.
And to hit the highlights going down, you see that cash and cash equivalents are actually higher at December 31st by 195,000.
Yeah, huge.
Now, the main reason for that is actually the holding of deferred revenue. So it's cash that's been received, such as member dues, that's cash in hand, but has not been earned yet. So there's a corresponding increase in deferred revenue.
Okay.
So other sources of cash has been the collection of accounts receivable. You see the billed receivables have gone down by $320,000. That was due to some very targeted collection effort by our staff. And maybe $100,000 of that was an exceptional item in the June 30th balance due to some subcontractor invoices that, you know, wouldn't be present at December 31st.
Okay. Now, one last comment on the 12/31/2023. All accruals are in, so you say a hard close, you're comfortable with everything's in, it should be in, to your
Yes.
knowledge. Okay.
Yes, so again, this is on the governmental fund basis,
Okay, gotcha.
so much more that cash flow oriented, but
Yeah.
all receivables are accrued, payables as
Okay.
known are accrued as well.
All right, thank you.
So, and the due from CUTA, that increase, that is about to be collected very shortly here with the second quarter billing. So from a receivable standpoint, we are doing a very good job of getting our items collected.
Collected the cash, getting the cash in hand, that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's great.
So then the other part of this is that the liabilities accounts payable, we have a decrease of 327,000. So that's a use of cash of 327,000. And again, that's payment of, you know, those exceptional vendor invoices that are due to the subcontractors of our housing grant. But it also represents, you know, the 114,000, that's just 30 days.
The net 30.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not carrying receivable or payables. We've not let anything
We're not held
go
on to
beyond
any beyond that due date.
the due date of the month.
And therefore, we're not incurring any penalties or interest or anything associated with the payment of them, right?
That is
Okay,
correct.
Good. All right, so,
And so you see in the deferred revenue, there is that significant increase. But that, all of that increase is expected to actually be earned throughout the second half of the year. And then the fund balance in total, it has gone down 92,000. You see that that's the same, the equivalent of our net loss for the 6-month period. And so we are still sitting on a fund balance that's over $1 million, which was the board's targeted balance. But we're starting to get into, a position where we need to take a look and make sure that we're ensuring that that balance is maintained.
Okay,
Now, we also have on the agenda for future meetings is to actually look at the fund balance policy
thanks.
to make sure that we're that $1 million is an effective and
Yeah.
appropriate measure at this time
Yeah,
in our life stage.
okay, that's to be determined, good point. That's on
Right.
our agenda item.
But
Pending
our
item.
current standard right now
Okay.
is $1 million.
That one made, okay, until we decide, rather. Thank you for that, mentioning that.
And then we have a very brief treasurer's report.
Good,
Whatever cash we have that's invested is invested in the state Commonwealth of Virginia sponsored LGIP fund. And those interest rates have actually increased since June.
okay. Now, will we have a penalty if we were to liquidate these? We don't incur a penalty?
No,
Okay,
it's immediate access.
media asset, okay, very good.
So,
Okay.
we have to execute
Okay.
whatever transfer, but we can sweep on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, very good. So no penalty incurred.
So from a balance sheet perspective, it's a sound, solid balance sheet. But the one thing that we need to start keeping our eye on is actually that cash balance, to make sure that we're efficient in our collections and payments, to make sure that our balances don't go too low.
Yeah, and that needs to be done monthly. We need to make sure that's done all pre-monthly, almost before the month end, and then see where we are and look at what interest we need to make or what have you as the month ends. So it's gotta be a closer view of that,
Right.
closer view as we go forward. Thank you.
So, we do,
Any questions or
All of
comments as
the
we move through here?
recordings.
Any comments y'all want to add, or feel free to as he goes through?
Well, I'm
Mr. Davis?
being new to this, I guess. I'm just curious, where we're not collecting money from right now, or who's owing
Okay.
us money? Like, I don't.
Yeah, you really jumped to the chase. I like that.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand
I
that.
appreciate your asking. That's why we're here,
Okay,
to ask
so-
questions.
real briefly,
Okay.
the accounts receivable, there's 3 types that we have listed there.
Okay.
Accounts receivable billed, those are items where we've earned the revenue and we've actually billed our funder. Most of that are state agencies,
Okay.
such as VDOT or VDOM.
So is that a grant that we're
Those are
waiting?
grants.
Okay,
So you'll see their equivalents in the income statement under federal revenue and part of it under state revenue.
so this is kind of like VDOT when they say, we funded this, but we're not doing this yet, and then the money will come in, is that kind of?
A little bit. All of the grant awards that this agency receives are paid on reimbursement basis. So
Okay.
we actually, and the
Makes
majority
sense.
of our expenses are in personnel and payroll.
Yeah.
And so we expend the money for the time that we worked on that particular grant funded project. And then
Yeah.
on monthly or quarterly basis, we are allowed to bill.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the accrued revenue line, that is what we have earned, but have yet to actually bill to the entity. So that's essentially waiting in the queue. So it's not, ready for collection.
And I think it's important, because we're a regional body, if I.
Please,
Thank you, sir.
yeah, Mr. Davis,
Is-
thank you, Sean.
Our 4,300 line is never an issue, which is our local folks
Okay.
paying what they need to pay. And, I guess we'll talk about that, obviously, because we feel our positions, keeping those positions filled and those folks billing those hours and things like that. So you gotta have that, we can shift personnel, but, it's one of those things when you deal with big account holders, even in the private sector, you work with Philip Morris, if they change their terms, you accept their terms. And those folks over there have been known to change their terms from time to time. But, I mean,
Okay.
I guess the question that I have is Sharon, Dan, but I mean, all in all, on what we bill and then when we receive, it's not egregious, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but like from the state, VDOT, VDOM stuff, I mean, it's not, we don't have, it's not an issue other than it's frustrating and yes, we have to deal with it on this side. But I mean, we get the money.
We get the money.
Yeah.
Eventually, there's one pair that takes longer than you would expect. Everybody else is very reasonable. So the key is that, like, the transportation program, the TPO, we only pay that quarterly. So when we bill, we're billing 3 months, which is a very significant part of our budget.
So was that part of our target, my last question, was that part of our targeted collections was to get on the phone and say,
It was actually a couple of the other grants where we had some things that were outstanding, for quite a
Typically,
while.
the transportation programs are fairly timely in their payment. The issue there is, as Stan said, we bill quarterly for those because of the terms of the grant agreements. And so it's a large sum, but fortunately they are timely.
okay,
We have some other partners that we can bill more regularly, more frequently, that are not as timely.
thank you.
But at this point, the quality of the receivables is, we're within the expected window of receipt of payment. So whether that's 30 days and there's one vendor that's more of a 90-day
Okay,
payer.
90-day payout. Is it something we should consider whether we should encourage them to pay additional earlier or have them to look at doing that? The state used to have us pay at the end of the fiscal year. The counties would fund the state for monies. They haven't done it lately, but years ago, we used to have to do that with the state pay from the county to them.
Yeah, one of our
Is that
finance
something?
functions initiatives is to actually
Okay,
become more efficient in the billing.
Okay.
Which the first step is for us to close the books
Okay.
sooner,
okay,
get the bill out
All right.
sooner,
okay,
and then monitor so that we don't have things that kind of stick out there, or if there
Very
are
good.
issues with the
Right.
vendor, that we know what they are and can address
Right.
them immediately.
yeah,
And I would add that the state association regularly discusses whether or not we want to pursue as a group, communicating the challenges that unprompt payment creates.
good,
And so that's a regular discussion among the members of the VAPDC and the board and the executive directors that participate.
great,
I think it's my personal belief that I would prefer to advocate for changes in the state agency where we have this issue through the state
Great.
association as opposed to individually, so
got
that
you.
we don't, damage the relationship that we do have that's very positive.
okay, okay,
And one other element that
that's-
we're looking at is
Okay.
whether or not we can actually bill some of these things more frequently than quarterly.
yeah, if that's possible, that's something we should pursue.
Right.
I
So
think,
we're seeing what's
Yeah.
contractually allowable.
Right.
And then if it's not,
Yeah.
then, we'll
Yeah.
pursue other opportunities. But at this point,
Yeah.
a 3-month receivable on some of these grants can be pretty significant on our
that
cash
is,
flow.
yeah, and I think Martha's point's well taken in terms of relationship, how we move forward. I think that's important to consider, Martha, I appreciate that. But I think we wanna be as proactive as possible in moving that stick forward for us. Because the next thing, we discussed this last year as well, friends, is that we discussed, if we needed cash, what would we do? What would be our option? What are the options available for us? And, I have a heartburn going back to our jurisdictions, which already pay and pay appropriately. So, but we need to look at that, what would happen, one of our members mentioned that, and we discussed it last October. What would we do if we needed additional cash flow? And so that's why the steps we are taking should be first primary, and then look at additional options as we move forward. So thanks for that comment as well. But I appreciate that, but that's something we have to do, given our position. It's not something that's a luxury, as it were, but rather almost somewhat a necessity. Okay,
Agreed. Okay, so with the balance sheet, that's all I had anticipated highlighting, so.
I think, thanks for this treasurer's report down below, because I'm looking up above, cash and cash equivalents I'm seeing down, and everything's tied nicely, and you got the rates there, that's good. I like having it on this balance sheet, the way you have it. So that's a good use of space and time. Thank you for that comment on that. Okay,
So, moving to page 13 of your package, you see the PlanRVA summary, profit and loss statement.
okay,
This is the highest level. of categories that we have. And to get to the bottom line first, we are now experiencing a loss of $92,000 for the 6 months ended December 31st.
Okay, our toughest months were, toughest programs, we can see are data, research and analysis, and of course, community engagement. Those are our two big, and we're close to emergency management as well, 48,600.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm
So where
sorry.
you see those negative amounts in the various columns,
Yeah.
the columns represent our major lines of activity, lines of business. The community engagement, community development, data research and analysis, those are emerging lines of business for us. So we know that we are subsidizing those lines from our general revenues. So to balance those out, you would see, transfers from the administration column, which is showing
Yeah.
an income of 107,000, but then you would transfer into each of those other areas.
I see.
But I thought for the purposes of our discussion that keeping those actual results visible is important. These are areas that we're trying to attract, non-traditional funding sources.
Okay,
So whether that's, project partners in the community or special grants, very focused grants, or even, service fee, where we do a project for someone specifically and we get paid for it. We have,
Was that Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police?
that's correct,
That's an example, that would be, yeah.
right, that's the example for the last 2 years.
Are there opportunities, maybe this is for Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, are there
Please do.
opportunities? They were so pleased with that, and of course, we can also take that information, unless they want to consider proprietary, and put that in our depository and use it for other things, particularly locality, in that case. Nobody's asked us to do a proprietary.
The only time we deal with any sort of information or data that is, I'll say, no. I mean, we do have certain confidential agreements,
Sure.
really around like critical infrastructure.
Right.
And so if there's sensitive information that would hinder public safety or those types of things, then we have agreements where we can't publicly release that information.
Are there opportunities, do you see on the horizon to do more of the contract work where we can do?
That
some
is
of
our hope,
that?
yeah,
that would be
And-
great, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, that's something we need to pursue as well,
Yes.
those type opportunities. And I see, I'm glad you're showing where the areas are, and as you just mentioned, I think that's appropriate to see before transfer, because transfer becomes obscure things, so we don't want to be obscure in anything. We
Right.
want to make sure we see it pre-transfer where we are, so you can show the true line item.
And I apologize, I misspoke, not our hope, that is our plan.
Plan, okay, that's even better. See, that sounds better even. Our plan, I love that. Great point there. So
And-
what we gotta do,
The emergency management
yeah,
column,
yes,
one of the intriguing things there is that $48,000 loss is very, very close to the indirect cost allocations of 47,000. By nature of those programs,
yeah, I see, 47, yeah.
they don't reimburse us for the indirect rate. So we still charge them, we still charge the program for it, so that we can see kind of what our funding gap is. But it's by nature of the agreement, we are being reimbursed on everything else that goes through that column. It's just that they will not cover our, the overhead as part of their grants.
Okay, now, given that, are we being reimbursed, or are there any costs we're not being reimbursed for? Are there any things that we're missing or missing out on?
I'll highlight something in a few minutes.
Please, okay, come to that, if you would.
And I'll just add on that note, since Dan brought it up, another thing that the state association has been working on literally for years is an attempt to dispute the Virginia Department of Emergency Management's position on the reimbursement of indirect costs.
Okay.
We do not believe that that is appropriate, given the federal guidelines and the super circular on treatment of indirect costs. We do not believe that VDM has the authority to do that, but as of yet, we have not been able to adequately convince them.
Convince them, yeah. So,
Right.
how would we do that if we were to do that, Martha? What would be your recommendation, or what should we do? Because I know you're always concerned about how we maintain our relationships
Yeah, I
as
mean,
harmoniously as possible.
again, as a state association, we've worked over the last couple of years to bring in experts on indirect cost allocation, to do joint education and training with our state agencies, including VDEM, on this issue. I think one of the challenges, just to put it bluntly, is that there's a lot of turnover in the department at the level where these types of decisions are made, and so that effort to educate and build that communication line regularly gets truncated because we have to start the conversation over.
We'll see.
But it is a topic, again, that is regularly discussed, timeliness of payment and the determination that indirect costs are not eligible is a topic of dispute between the planning district commissions that receive their funds and the agency.
One other thing to understand is that these grants we're contracted with the state entity, but the fundings are actually passed through federal programs. So the state also has their issues with, their review, their audits, federal level programming issues as well. So like, Ms. Schickel said, that's why we're doing the statements this way, and why I want to highlight in this meeting some of these elements, is to kind of see where those subtle gaps are coming, so that they can be highlighted and then, develop the strategy as necessary as to how to go about. The indirect cost rate is significant because that's how we pay all of our overhead, all of our administrative work, our rent.
Yeah, that percentage,
Depreciation on all of our fixed assets. So it's a very important part of our funding.
Yeah.
Is to be able to pay for, our just presence, our ability to be here.
Okay.
So.
One thought or not understanding, given the change that you point out and it's state related, is there someone like a deputy director of an area we might be able to pursue? Who's deputy director of that particular area? I'm not very knowledgeable of the state in this hierarchy.
Yes, we have done agency head and agency leadership meetings.
Okay.
One of the solutions that some of the planning district commissions have done that we haven't adopted as of yet is that if the grant agreement is structured on more of a pay for performance basis as opposed to a time and materials reimbursement, so that many of the PDCs that have moved to that model have been able to get reimbursed to recoup the indirect cost because they're not billing time and then applying the indirect rate to it. They're billing for, completion of this stage of the work. And it's more of a fixed price model.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we're exploring to determine whether that's a billing method that we can adopt.
Yeah, that's certainly worth contemplating. Do you agree, Dan?
I agree.
I agree. That's worth contemplating. Let's pursue those avenues as well.
Yeah.
Before we get too far downstream.
The fundamental reimbursement basis for most of our funding is actually a direct cost, 100% of cost reimbursement basis. You get paid 100% of your wage, then you get 100% of your fringe because that's how you create your fringe rate, and then 100% of your indirect because that's how you create your indirect rate. So the timing of it is over a couple of years between where you set your rate, but fundamentally it's a break even.
Yeah. Yeah, so we might want to pursue that, then if others have done it, are doing it, and it's advantageous, we might want to pursue that.
Mr. Chair, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
Have they done it with success?
That's I would assume, that's almost an assumption, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
asked that, sir. I'm glad you asked that.
I
We may be
get,
jumping.
I mean, look, I'll say that I get why they want to do it, if I was on that side.
Yeah.
But there are built-in costs, there's overhead, that we just can't do time and materials on everything.
Right.
But I know some of that was measures that people were trying to put in place for fiscal responsibility on programs and saying they didn't want different agencies adding this and this and this. But the reality is, you can't just have somebody build the deck for time and materials. I mean, there's tools involved, there's vehicles involved, and those are things that contractors, in this case us, have that are built into the job. So I mean, so have they had movement on that on a large scale?
There's just a philosophical difference of opinion. I mean, we've tried to erase the term overhead from our vocabulary.
Right, but I don't even use
because that
overhead
has
anymore.
a,
Right.
has a negative
Yeah.
connotation. Then just to your point, there's a reality that there are costs that through the indirect cost allocation method, there are costs incurred by this agency to do the work, and it's necessary to do that work. Federal government provides for a way to do that and bill it, and the state agencies, team members just believe that the 5% management and administrative fee that they pay is sufficient to cover that, which is obviously nowhere near appropriate. So it's a philosophical difference, and just as, you hit the nail on the head, no pun intended, but the perception that indirect costs are overhead, that there's, waste or there's some sort of superfluous spending is I think the big driver of the disconnect. I do wanna note the time, it's
Okay,
9:11.
please do.
I saw you
I'm
did
sorry,
something.
thank you.
That's why I
Yeah.
asked my question
Thank you.
very quickly.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
Mostly because we do want to talk about,
Okay.
I think, the look forward.
Yeah,
It's
let's do
important to
that.
understand
Okay.
where we are and how we
All
got
right,
here,
good
but
deal.
Yeah, the rest of what I highlight here will
Okay,
look at what the budget is as well.
okay, very good. We want to do that. Thank you.
If you look at the
Thanks for
funding
that.
section, the
Thank you.
income section,
It's on tax.
federal funding,
Okay.
we're at 38.7 and 37.5% of our projected budget, which is significantly less than 50%.
Okay. Where is it?
It's at the top of page 13.
Page 13, top. All right, I got you. Okay.
And that shortfall turns into about, from what you would expect, if we would expect to collect 50% of our revenues by this time, we should have about $300,000 more of revenues,
Okay.
or 300,000 to 400,000, depending on how you look at these
Significant
things. So it's a very significant
That
gap.
is, thank you, Dan. for
The
pointing it out.
causation there
Okay.
is some
Okay.
staffing,
Okay,
and we had one very significant staffing change earlier this fiscal year, where that time and effort is no longer part of what we have to bill. The work is still getting done. This speaks to the previous comment about, do we want to be on a cost reimbursement basis, or do we just want to get paid for getting the work done? But this is where some of that shows up. If we don't have the hours or, basically the salary, the compensation to put against a grant, then, we have to find other ways. And that's the most significant way that we actually earn revenue to keep our sustainability. That's how we earn revenue to pay for fringe benefits and our indirect costs.
okay,
So that's a very significant budget issue right now, which we are, very much focused on.
okay,
The other item is at the bottom, you see capital expense and projects.
okay,
That $65,000 was for the completion of our move into this space. And so that is something that was planned. But it's kind of sitting there because it was expended in the first 2 months of the year with the plan that the entire 12 months would help cover to pay for it. But the difference is in previous years, we actually paid for those capital items out of the fund balance. This fiscal year, we were planning to pay them from our actual operating.
operating costs, okay,
So we're still looking at the budget to accomplish that, but we have a lot of budget revision that we need to go through.
okay, very good, thanks.
And so, starting on page 14, you see a lot more detail of each of those sections.
Right,
There is a couple areas in our expenses. You also see that they are also below 50% below expectation. Salaries and wages at 48.8, fringe at 47. Kind of given an anomaly of the staffing shift, the real savings is actually more than just that 48%. But each of the other expense groups are well below a 50% line. So well, we're having revenue issues, and that's mostly what's driving the $92,000 loss.
is our revenue,
We're being diligent about the expense side
which
as
is
well.
what you were asking, Dan, about the revenue side.
Yeah.
All right, any
Okay.
other comments on the financial statements from in item 3? Any other comments you want to make, or anything you think we should adjust? When you say revenue, it's really revenue that's driving the deviation or downturn, if you will. And we also need a recommendation to the full commission for acceptance of the financial statements. Are we prepared to do that, Neil? Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable recommending we recommend to the full commission? Everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah, I would support that.
I support that, sir. I do indeed. Okay, then, we can vote. I recommend we, report acceptance of the financial statements thus presented, to the full commission.
Second.
And it's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. That's unanimous. Thank you so very much. All right, looking forward. Dan, so it's revenue we gotta make up. So it's
Looking
revenue,
forward.
it's revenue. So look, moving forward, what do we do?
So, I do not have a visual or a handout,
Okay?
so I apologize that a lot of this would be verbal,
Okay,
but there are a lot of moving parts yet. Essentially, what we're doing strategically is emphasizing with staff that their efforts need to go into programs that have funding existing right now. When we went into this fiscal year, we had about $225,000 identified as new revenue sources.
okay,
We have a verbal confirmation that we may be receiving $50,000 of that for one of our programs. But I don't have that modeled in yet on the conservative basis, just because we don't have the commitment.
okay,
But we're looking at a revenue shortfall projected at about $400,000 to $500,000 for the fiscal year, when I add in the next 6 months. We'll be spending time as a leadership team, specifically this coming Tuesday, to really emphasize the need and just, which activities need to be done, because we still need to get the work done, which activities fall within our funding parameters, so that we can maximize whatever we have. And when we can have a stronger emphasis there, we can see what our true revenue shortfall may be, and then adjust our expenses accordingly. We identified a few expense categories that we can forego.
okay, good.
There are a couple of, significant items. There's, less than salary savings on a projected basis, as we are fully staffed up than I thought we would, but there is some there. Some fringe benefit savings. But there are savings in other types of discretionary areas. So there is a bonus pool that was there in the original budget. There were some investment elements. Remember the capital line, there's about $25,000 left. That was to go towards IT, technology investments. So we can work with the timing of those things. We don't want to, go back to a plan where we only buy IT when we can. The idea going into this year was that we would, invest every single year so that we're at the front leading edge. No, we don't have to come up with deficits downstream. So we're looking at alternative funding for those than what we had planned. Can they actually fit within the grant programs that we're not utilizing with, our personnel costs? We have a couple of other initiatives. We had an event that was planned that we now have a special revenue source for. So at this point, I can't give you the plan at this point because I'm not comfortable with the specifics of it. Revenue is still ambiguous. Last night, I received the updated letter from our ICAP. We get a review audit on those fringe and indirect rates that we've been discussing. And we had a correction in the rate that applies to this year, so I have to model that as well. So we'll be pushing that through to see where we are, but the idea is that we will still be looking to support a break-even or close to break-even budget. If you look at the budget column, we're looking at like a $5,000 surplus for this year. Knowing that we had some risk with identifying and then earning some new revenue sources, some new types of grants. But we've done the investment in the positions to help us do that. And so we're hopeful going forward that these efforts will come to fruition, that they'll, bear revenue for us to help pay for those costs. But, at this point, we're taking a conservative look. What happens if we don't get those revenues? Then it could be, a total issue of about $400,000, maybe $500,000 on the revenue side.
It's pretty significant,
So-
half of our fund balance. Any comments or questions? Because my comment would be, I think we need to look at discretionary. And discretionary costs was, that can be contemplated, discretionary. At least until we are more comfortable and the revenue side picks up. It's what we all need to look at. What's discretionary? A list of options in that area until we can get through the tough period that we have.
We also do have a request on the executive committee agenda for next week, a request to approve filling two positions that we've advertised for. The idea being that these would be two planner positions that would be directly assigned to the transportation program. The program where we do have work stacking up
Okay.
that we
So
haven't
we
been able to
need to-
accomplish this fiscal year, and where we also have lagging revenues, so budget funds are available to support the positions.
Okay,
And so that is a part of the modeling that Dan's referring to.
Okay.
If we're authorized to fill those two planner positions, then that creates an opportunity for us to move more of the work forward
Okay.
on the work program and, reap the benefit of the billing into those programs. It's not gonna catch up the lag completely, but it will help accelerate the billing in that particular program.
for the last quarter, because we entered this last quarter.
Yeah, so we've been in the process
February,
of
June.
recruitment in anticipation of approval, so that if we get approval next week, we can extend offers of employment. And so I think the targets for one position could be as soon as March 1st and the second on March 16th.
That's good.
And so,
That's pretty soon.
the idea would be that we would seek that approval of the executive committee,
Yeah.
so that we can kind of fill a portion of that gap that way.
You'll be prepared to recommend that to Mr. Chairman accordingly.
Yes,
It will help us, I'm supportive, if it will help us, and as you deemed it would be. So we definitely want to do that.
Yeah.
That's a plus side versus having to just cut, as we'll contemplate.
And I'll note that just from an employment recruitment market perspective, right now, we've just seen over time, over the last two years or so, that it has just been very difficult. We've had the director of the TPO position open and recruiting now for 5 months and have not had success, as you know.
Yes.
In that process, and so we've, through the organizational changes that Dan mentioned, we've kind of shifted gears and are anticipating that position will remain vacant for a longer period of time because it's been so difficult to recruit. But these new planning positions at a more junior level, there's just a greater market of talent out there available to fill those positions.
So that's very feasible then.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll reap salary savings accordingly.
And I mean, just to give an order of magnitude, I think we have 4 applicants, both qualified applicants in the pool for the director of TPO position over that 5-month period. Miles, correct me if I'm wrong, it's over 20 in the planning
Okay.
pool, or maybe not quite that many, but
Our application,
yeah, in the application pool,
Okay. Okay.
30, I think now.
over 30, okay, yeah, so you can tell the difference.
Okay.
So I just want the committee to
I'm
be aware
generally
of that.
I'm generally supportive of that if everyone else is. Dan, you okay? Based on what Martha.
Yeah, I'm just
Pickle-
trying to, this is all new to me, like
I
this type
got you.
of, this whole world.
I understand.
But way I'm understanding it is there's a potential of savings on salaries if we don't have employees, but there's also a hurt on revenue if we don't have employees to bill hours
Exactly.
that employees are already working. So you're overworking your employees if you don't hire, but you don't get revenue for it. Is that the way I'm understanding it? So it's like a catch-22,
Yeah,
like.
so think about it this way. We have core staff members, myself, our finance team, mostly, that are not typically billable to these grant programs because it's not the type of work that we do. And so those costs remain relatively stable over this period of time. We are always gonna have a finance director position. It's mission critical, obviously.
Yeah.
That position remains stable. As planners come in and out of our roster of team members, when that, yes, the cost goes away when we don't have that person in the role, but so does the billing that helps offset those indirect costs. And so when we don't have that balance in place, it actually hurts us. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to
Our
not.
folks bill, I'm sorry, our folks bill, so we've got work over here that we need those folks, so, in a regular company, say, well, I just saved, however much money from an employee. But we also don't, I mean, obviously, what we bill has to cover the cost of the employee. You know, that's where, so we need these planners in place. So not only can they get the legitimate work done, but they also are revenue generators for the work that they do. So unlike cost-saving measures where a company might cut employee staff, we're on the other side, that when we don't have those employees, we don't have folks able to get that work done, therefore we're not able to bill those hours. And so those have to
Well
be,
said.
have to be filled.
Well said, sir, well
That
said.
helps, that explains a lot.
Thank you, appreciate that, thanks so much. Other comments? I know we're getting close to time out there, so. What else, Dan?
I had nothing else to highlight.
Nothing else, okay. Under item 5, I know we want to add to that emergency revenue options, or emergency source funding options, or add that option in there if you would. Emergency is something for the future, we discussed that last year, but we didn't finalize it. So we want to look at what we can do in that area. What are some brainstorming steps we can look at? If we have to get there, given the significant drop in revenue that we contemplate. Okay, just add that if you would, Ms. Hickle. Yes, Dan, anything else, Dan, you want to add before we get ready to wrap up? Anything else,
No,
sir?
sir. Thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate greatly your being here, appreciate the discussion, and I think we're gonna have a more serious view of where we are. We almost gonna be on a phone call if you need, speed dial, if need be, for things we might wanna contemplate doing, so I just wanted to highlight that as we enter the last 6 months of our fiscal year.
And I'll just
Ms.
note
Hickle,
on the
yeah.
back part of the agenda.
Yes, please.
The goal
Yeah,
is
I
to
think
bring
that-
a revised budget update to
Okay.
the committee on February 29th. If
Okay.
that if that day and time
Yeah,
works.
that's good,
And
that's
then
good,
we
yeah.
resume our regularly scheduled committee meeting schedule, as adjusted for your teaching schedule
Yeah.
for April and May.
Yeah,
With the focus in the end of February would be to bring that revised
Yeah.
budget to this committee so that then it can channel through to the full commission,
sounds great.
and executive committee.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that. Any other items to come before us at this point? Any other comments, suggestions? Hearing none, we're adjourned, and we'll motion to adjourn. I guess we'll motion to adjourn. Move that we, and second that we adjourn. We'll adjourn. Thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it so much. Thank you all for being here. We got a lot done today. And so,